everybody, welcome to the briefing room on this Monday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington with our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce. Great to have you, Mary,
to
kick off the week and kick off the countdown to another possible shutdown.
I can't believe we're still talking about this.
We're doing this all over again now. The clock ticking 4 days until we are out of money again. It had seemed on Friday when we went into the weekend that they might have a deal. We were talking about coming together on fencing. Democrats actually were going to give a little bit, but now today there's all this dispute over detention beds. How did we get to this point? What's that all about?
So yeah, you're right. They did think they were going to be announcing a compromise deal today. That obviously is not happening because talks once again are stalled. And this time the big holdup isn't just the wall, which is still a sticking point, but they do think they came around a compromise over that. It is this issue of detention beds. Democrats are trying to demanding to limit the number of beds in an effort to try and force the administration to focus instead on detaining immigrants with criminal records, not just undocumented immigrants that are otherwise law-abiding. They want to limit the capacities to try and force the administration's hands because they feel that they're concerned that they're doing too many broad sweeps, and they want to say, look, focus on detaining just undocumented immigrants with criminal records, not just undocumented immigrants that may have.
And that's landed with a thud at the White House. The president,
huge thud. The president says that they, not surprisingly, has blasted Democrats on Twitter, and it has led to the situation where everyone is saying, look, once again, tick-tock, where does this leave us?
Yikes. So it leaves us really nowhere right now.
Right now, lawmakers on the Hill are meeting. They're trying to come up with some kind of plan. I'm told all hope is not lost. There's always wiggle room on the Hill, but they are significantly behind in this process, and I'm told that they are further apart right now than they were this time on Friday.
All of this playing out, as you know, Mary, as hundreds of thousands of federal workers who suffered in the last shutdown, record 35 days, just finally, many of them got their back pay situated. Now they're looking at another possible shutdown. We're joined now by one of those federal workers from Chicago, Lorene Targos. She is an EPA scientist there who we had on the show or talked to ABC News back a couple weeks back about the impacts on her. Lorene, great to see you. So what are your feelings as you're watching this political showdown unfold once again?
I think along with millions of other Americans, dismayed that they can't just get through a budget that doesn't include fighting about something that doesn't affect our missions that we're hired to do. We're civil servants and we're trying to get our work done, and they really shouldn't involve politics in that. They should keep the government open, funding these essential services that we rely on as citizens and then as employees that we want to continue doing without interruption.
Yeah, and you told us last month here at ABC News Live that the shutdown had a huge impact on you and your family. You're the primary breadwinner in your family, not just your own personal finances, but also the work that you were doing, two separate things, good work at EPA. Have you gotten your back pay, and how about those projects that you manage? Have those kind of gotten back up to speed, or is there sort of a backlog still lingering here?
There's definitely a backlog. As for the back pay, I have gotten some back pay, but I haven't had the opportunity to really do the full accounting to see, if everything's accounted for there. And then as for my projects, we just had a catch-up meeting this morning where, we're trying to get things rolling, but there's so many questions. Everyone's busy having meetings on catching up from that, and now we're about to shut down again. So in addition to trying to catch up, we have to do this week worrying about, is the government going to shut down again, and preparing for that.
And what will the consequences be for you, Lorene, personally, if we do unfortunately cross into another shutdown on Saturday night? What's that going to mean this go round for you?
Like a what is it? Like a deja vu of the same stress we just had a month ago, where, how are we going to pay the bills and, realize, you have a budget sheet and you follow along, and then you have to worry about, okay, did I get all my back pay, and which bills am I going to pay now? And, it's really difficult.
We can hear the sense of disbelief in your voice there. You just almost can't even believe it. It sounds like that this is actually going to happen again. We hope it doesn't happen again, for certainly. Lorene Targos, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to check back with you, an EPA scientist in Chicago, back on the job, hoping we don't have another shutdown. Thanks so much, Lorene. And Mary Bruce, you did mention negotiators are meeting this afternoon. They're going to try to come up with something up against this deadline Friday. What happens if they can't come up with a deal?
Yeah.
Does it automatically mean shutdown, or is there perhaps...
There are basically three options if you look at the big picture here. One, they could pass another short-term solution. We're told that some Republicans have been floating the idea of just doing a one-year CR, a one-year continuing resolution.
Keep government funding
which would
at the same levels.
Kick the can down the road, but just keep things the way they are. Democrats have already rejected that, so that one's out the window. But they could come up with another possible short-term fix. The second option is that the president could go around Congress and declare that national emergency that he has been threatening. He still is leaving that on the table. But of course, Republicans, even some of the president's top allies, say that would set a bad precedent. They're warning him it's a bad move, and it would almost certainly be challenged in court and by Democrats. But it could allow the president to at least politically claim a win. The third option is to go ahead and shut down the government to try and force Democrats to cave. And the White House did say over the weekend that they aren't ruling that one out either.
Mary Bruce, great to have you. I know you got to get back to doing some reporting on this story. So let's go over to the White House, where Jordan Phelps is tracking some of the things. Mary's talking about the White House view on all of this. Jordan, have they taken a shutdown off the table? What are you hearing there about the prospects we could be headed for one on Friday?
Devin, unfortunately, the prospects are very real. The president's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, was on the Sunday shows yesterday, and he said you absolutely cannot take a government shutdown off the table. His argument there is that that would be taking away a huge negotiating tactic that the White House has in its hands right now. So they're keeping those threats very real and pressing for now, Devin.
And Jordan, all of this unfolding as the president is going to hit the campaign trail tonight. He's headed to the southern border, to El Paso, Texas, his first campaign rally of 2019. But he's actually facing some blowback over his use of that city as a case study for why a wall is needed.
Yeah, Devin, the mayor of El Paso is just one example pushing back on the president, claiming that somehow El Paso has become so safe because of that wall. But the mayor pointing out that El Paso has never been one of the most dangerous cities. There's his tweet: El Paso was never one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. We've had a fence for 10 years, and it has impacted illegal immigration and curbed criminal activity. It is not the sole deterrent. Law enforcement in our community continues to keep us safe. So there, the mayor pointing out that the president is misconstruing this. Obviously, the mayor concedes there that while the wall has been one factor, it is not all of them. And Devin, furthermore, we saw crime rates drop in El Paso in the years before that wall construction even began.
Yeah, and the president, of course, holding up El Paso in his State of the Union address last week when talking about the wall. Will be worth closely watching tonight. Jordan Phelps, thank you so much for your reporting. The mayor of El Paso, Texas, Dee Margo, is a Republican. He's had some very interesting things to say about the president coming to visit his town. Our Cecilia Vega, senior White House correspondent, just caught up with the mayor, and this is a little bit of their conversation.
You've heard the president say it. He says El Paso was one of the most dangerous cities in the country, and now, thanks to the border fence, it's not. To that you say?
We are the safest city in the nation, according to FBI statistics, but it's not as a result of the border fence. He was merely echoing what our Attorney General, the Texas Attorney General, said a few weeks ago in McAllen, which was not correct.
Which is what?
Well,
he was
misconception
saying, entirely?
But yes, that we were lawless beforehand with high crime rates, et cetera, and then the fence went up and it was 180 degrees. That's not the case.
Reality on the ground is what?
Well, since before 2005, we've always been one of the safest cities in the nation. I think when the fence went up, we were like number 2, and then we became number 1.
Did the border fence have any impact on crime here?
Well, I think it did have some impact, along with our community policing and things of that, like that. I mean, we're a sovereign nation. We need to control our borders. A physical barrier is probably part and parcel to that security, but it's not the total panacea. It's going to take manpower. It's going to take technology. The state of Texas, you cannot do a fence based on our geography from El Paso to Brownsville.
So a fence from sea to shining sea, which he now says he doesn't want to do.
Right, I understand that.
Does it matter to you what they call it, a wall, a fence? Is any of that needed here?
Well, I think there are places that it would be needed to help channel migration, and you know, most of the drugs that are intercepted are at the ports. They're not out in the open areas, and it also from the migrant standpoint of those crossing illegally, it helps. I do.
You sound a little exasperated.
Well, you know, I've spent a week explaining the mischaracterizations. We're we're the intersection of 3 states: New Mexico, Chihuahua, Texas, 2 countries, the United States and Mexico, and 1 region comprising 2.5 million people. We've been together with Juarez for almost 400 years. There are families on both sides. There's commerce on both sides. We have 115,000 jobs on this side of the border tied to the maquila manufacturing process in northern Mexico, and they have 559,000 jobs tied to that.
Is there a crisis at the border?
Well, we're getting 300 to 400 migrants per day coming over after being processed by ICE, so I'd say that's a problem. That's significantly greater than we've had in the past years. So we need to do something, but I'm not so sure our physical barriers are what we need to do. We need to do something more related to what we're doing in Central America.
But you called it a problem. Would you call it a crisis?
Well, it has become very taxing on our NGO, the Annunciation House. If we get above 500, that's a problem. So it will tax our resources, et cetera. So I don't know that I would call it a crisis, but I would say it's a challenge and it's a problem.
Is it worth declaring a national emergency over?
I would say no. From my perspective, it also is not worth a shutdown. There were no, I listened to the pundits in Washington and elsewhere talk about who won and who lost in the shutdown. There were no winners in that prior shutdown. We have 13,000 federal employees here in El Paso. There were no winners.
You are on the ground here. This is your world. You see this every day. What's happening in Washington with their perception of what's happening in El Paso? Is it a misunderstanding? Is it blatant mischaracterization? What are they doing with the facts?
Well, I'm not sure they really have the facts, and most of them have never been down to the border. So my position has always been, if you want to understand the border, you come to El Paso.
What is the message from El Paso to President Trump?
We're a vibrant community. We're the safest city in the United States. We need to control our borders, but there are other ways to do it besides just focusing on that single physical barrier.
You don't have the new video. Okay. And that was Mayor Dee Margo, Republican mayor of El Paso, with our senior White House correspondent Cecilia Vega. Much more coming up on World News Prime here on ABC News Live at 8 p.m. tonight. Great to see that reporting. I should say the president is headed to El Paso, Texas tonight. Of course, there will be a big campaign rally there, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have that for you here on ABC News Live. Also, former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who was challenging Ted Cruz in the 2018 campaign, a rumored possible 2020 Democratic contender, is holding a counter rally tonight with a number of Democrats and immigrant advocates there in El Paso. We will be bringing that rally to you live as well. All that coverage begins tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern time here on ABC News Live. Well, I'm joined now by one of our political reporters. Great to see Rachel Scott, fresh in from the snow.
I'm back.
And Iowa and Minnesota, you were out there on the campaign trail. Boy, what a blitz. 240 miles you drove through Iowa. I think many more are going to be on the docket for you. But tell us your impressions. What was the scene like out there? We're seeing some pictures here of you from Amy Klobuchar's announcement. That was where you ended your trip. But you got to see a number of Democratic candidates up close over the weekend.
Yeah, that's right, Devin. So I was in Iowa with Senator Cory Booker, his first trip to Iowa since first announcing his candidacy for president. And he was having a lot of roundtable discussions and community forums spread out all across the state. So we were crisscrossing along with him. I was crisscrossing along with him, following him at each of his stops.
And he had company.
And he had some company. He had
competition.
He had Mayor Pete Buttigieg, which I want to try and get
Pete Buttigieg. He gave us some lessons here.
Get his name. Mayor of South Bend, Indiana, who likes to go by the just Mayor Pete.
Mayor
he says
Pete.
Mayor Pete is fine. He calls himself the Millennial Mayor, and he was out there as well, holding some roundtable discussions and holding some meet and greets in coffee shops. And that's what I love about Iowa, right? It's one of those rare states where you could run into a presidential candidate in a coffee shop.
What was the
at a
interest
restaurant.
level in the candidates everywhere you went? Were there big turnouts? Were there sort of, what was that like?
Yeah, well, for Senator Cory Booker, there was definitely some large turnout. His largest event had 500 people that were there, and it was cold, right? So we were all packing in at one of his locations. It was standing room only. We were at a brewery in Iowa, and everyone packed in, was standing shoulder to shoulder, and lots of people packed that space that definitely exceeded the event location.
A lot of enthusiasm for Democrats in Iowa, and of course you ended your trip in Minnesota, my home state, and you were in the middle of a blizzard. I don't know, has there ever been a presidential candidate to announce in a blizzard? Amy Klobuchar, something of a moderate, a centrist. She's running on a campaign of getting things done, being sort of a bipartisan deal maker in Washington. Bring us inside that announcement. First of all, what was her pitch? And secondly, what was it like to be out there 16 degrees in a blizzard when she announced?
Yeah, well, I think one of the supporters put it best when he said from white out to a bid for the White House, because it was white out conditions out there. I mean, that park is supposed to be beautiful.
Blue Island, yeah.
You're supposed to be able to see the skyline, and it was all fogged out with those white out conditions that were there. It was just flat out really cold. But still, you see the senator, she was out there, no gloves, no beanie, no teleprompter.
And throwing some punches.
And
took a little swipe at Hillary Clinton,
Yep.
saying she's going to be spending time in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
which, as she said, Hillary didn't spend as much time. Also talking about Iowa, of course. Midwest seems to be her bread and butter. George Stephanopoulos, chief anchor of Good Morning America, got a chance to sit down with Amy Klobuchar this morning after her announcement in an exclusive interview. Here's a little bit of that conversation. Take a listen.
It feels like it is a major, major burden that you have to do this right, that you have to get to this point where you decide, I'm going to go through this. I believe I'll be a good president, and our nation is tired of being governed by chaos, that we need to be governed by opportunity. And so that's what I talked about yesterday in that huge snowstorm. I bring a background of growing up in the heartland. I bring some grit to the race that comes from being the granddaughter of an iron ore miner and the daughter of a teacher and a newspaperman, and someone that has risen to the challenges every time I get a job. I did that as prosecutor for 8 years. I did that in the Senate. The president signed in the last 2 years 34 of my bills into law that I've led or been the lead Democrat on, and I like to get things done. And then I think finally, I don't think anyone is talking enough about the challenges that are the challenges of our day. These are challenges like the digital disruption and the changes that it's making to the workforce, the need for privacy laws, and no one is willing to take on the tech companies. I am. The need to do something about prescription drugs. My guest to the State of the Union has a son who had to ration his insulin, a restaurant manager, because it got so expensive. And then he ended up dying. That is what's happening right now in America. And so we need to bring down the prescription drug prices. We need to make it easier for families. And we have to do something about climate change.
And Amy Klobuchar, Rachel, also taking some tough questions. One of the first negative stories to hit her campaign was this report that came out last week from some of her former staffers that she's a pretty tough boss. And I understand out there in the snow, we have some pictures of this. You actually asked her about that. What'd she have to say?
Yeah, well, these reports really did taint her big announcement, her big day. There are reports from the Huffington Post that say that she has mistreated her staff. And so right after that speech ended, reporters rushed to the sidelines and were awaiting the senator to come down and cross us. And we shouted questions to her. And among those, we asked her if those reports are true. And she said, hey, listen, I am a tough boss. I have high expectations for myself. I have high expectations for my staff, but I love my staff. And campaign aides tell me that the night before, she actually held an event to honor her staff, a staff appreciation sort of event where she invited volunteers and campaign and staff and family and friends to come to thank them for their support.
She does have the third highest staff turnover rate in the Senate, so that was sort of the starting point for that conversation, but interesting to hear her answer. Shifting gears just a little bit, Rachel, before we let you go, we've got to talk about some other news by another Senate candidate today, Kamala Harris of California. Had an interesting interview with a couple of guys on a radio show where they asked her about marijuana, a hot issue in this primary season. Take a listen to her answer.
Also, and I know the answer to this too, they say you oppose legalizing weed.
That's not true.
I know.
and look, I joke about it, half joking. Half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me?
They be so mad at you. Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like
and I inhale. I did inhale.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. But yes.
I know you have to go. They say you have to go.
I just broke news.
I mean, was it in college? See, I like stuff like that. That's a real honest answer.
Real.
Was it a blunt or joint?
It was a joint.
Hey,
Yeah.
you remember the high?
I do.
So if it was legalized all throughout the country and medicinal, would you, do it?
Listen, I think that it gives a lot of people joy, and we need more joy.
More joy as well.
All right, she wants to spread some joy. It's actually going to be a hot topic this primary season. As you know, Democrats are talking about this. Most Democrats, I think 70% in the most recent Pew poll, say it should be legalized nationwide.
Yeah, and this is something that came up when Booker was out in Iowa campaigning, and he kind of turned it into a talking point and saying that we have so many people that have been sentenced for, low-collar offenses,
criminal justice
issues as well. But he was saying, hey, listen, people smoke marijuana, people use the substance, and we shouldn't be criminalizing these people if past presidents have admitted to doing it themselves. So there you see Senator Harris poking some fun at it, obviously, and like she said, making some news and
making noise and spreading joy. That'll be the mantra for the day. Rachel Scott, great to see you, and good luck back out there on the trail. We're going to swap you out now for our next story with Stephanie Ebbs, our environmental reporter. Stephanie, great to see you. So next we're going to talk about a story that probably hasn't gotten your attention. You may not have heard about it, but it is certainly an environmental disaster, as you've been uncovering. This is a story that affects dozens of states. It involves a chemical that's contaminating water, hurting lakeside communities, and officials at the EPA just now starting to get a grip. And take a look at these pictures. This white foam on the surface of the water. This is a lakeside community in Michigan. One of the cities affected is getting an up close and personal feel for this substance. It's called PFAS. So, Stephanie, break down for us, what is the chemical and where is it found?
Yeah, so PFAS, PFAS, it actually stands for a class of chemicals. There's hundreds of different chemicals in this category that are used for all kinds of things. They're used in firefighting foam, they're used in food packaging, carpets. They're kind of a miracle chemical in the world of chemicals for making things non-stick and waterproof.
And also firefighting foam is most commonly used.
Usually for jet fuel fires.
And you've been looking into these pictures are from community members that have shared them with you. This is an actual lake. Look at that right there.
Yeah, it looks like meringue.
What are the impacts of that chemical if you ingest it or swim in it?
Well, it's they've been telling members of this community to stay away from this foam because you don't want to ingest this substance, right? The main concern is that if you're ingesting it in any way, if your dogs are swimming in the foam, they're going to swallow the water. If you're swimming and don't wash yourself off. But really these chemicals it's one of the biggest stories in kind of, if you follow the EPA closely, they're right now classified as emerging contaminants. There's a big debate going on. Community members like those in Oscoda, they say, we've grown up swimming in this lake and now you're telling us it's full of chemicals. We need more. You need you to do more. We need this cleaned up right away. EPA is working on a big national plan to do that, but a lot of community members, a lot of states say we need more, and we don't expect a lot from an administration that wants to roll back
some heat,
regulations.
a little slow out of the gate. Investigative reporter Garrett Ellison, he is with mlive.com in Michigan, been one of those on the front lines of this story, joins us now live. Garrett, great to see you, sir. You've been pushing the envelope on this story, reporting it out before it's been in the national spotlight, even as EPA struggles to get their arms around it. Bring us inside the frustration in some of the communities that you've been working in as they sort of start to learn the impacts of this very dangerous chemical.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. The frustration in communities like Oscoda, Rockford, Belmont in Michigan, Parchment, you may have heard of, people have a kind of a before PFAS and after PFAS type of effect on their lives. When it's discovered, whether it's in the environment, in fish contaminating surface waters like Lake Van Etten and the foam that you see, they start wondering, how have I been exposed to it? Is it in my drinking water? And unfortunately, in Michigan, we've been finding that there's many communities where it has been found in the drinking water. And it sparks this debate as to, well, what's a safe level? There's EPA has a level that's advisory. The state of Michigan has different levels for groundwater and surface water, and there's a lot of confusion among different communities, and a lot of people have many, many questions, and definitely one of them is, why are we just hearing about this? Why is this something that's new? Why isn't it regulated already?
Yeah, it does. There are some striking similarities to like the Flint water crisis after when the lead had been in the water for so long. Residents learned about it in many cases too late after they had ingested it for many years. This is very similar. What are authorities there saying about this? Are there any efforts underway to clean it up?
Yes, there are. In Michigan, in 2018, the state kind of embarked on the first statewide effort across the country to test all the different drinking water systems, municipal, community, residential, all schools that draw from a well, a private drinking water well. And they found at least in the 2018 testing, they discovered that there was PFAS, at least some kind of PFAS at some level, even if it's very low levels, in drinking water serving about 1.4 million people statewide, which is a chunk of the population. We have about 10 million people in Michigan. And that includes some pretty big water systems, such as the city of Grand Rapids, the city of Kalamazoo, the city of Ann Arbor. They have varying levels of this, low levels, but varying levels of this stuff.
Garrett, what are they telling people to do? Are there ways to test for this at home? Are they telling, can you boil it? If you boil water, or does that get rid of it?
No. This is the type of, these chemicals are so robust. These are nonstick compounds that repel water and heat and oil, and you can't just boil this stuff out if you're at home concerned about cooking with this water or drinking with it. You have to filter it through specialized techniques such as granular activated carbon or reverse osmosis. There are filters you can get for your home that will take care of it. There are also, whole house filters are under the same. A lot of people are just resorting to buying bottled water or getting a Culligan water system put in there.
And that can be very expensive. Garrett Ellison, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow Garrett's reporting, great reporting, at mlive.com. We hope to check back with him on this story as it unfolds. And Stephanie, this week EPA is expected to announce some new rules on this.
We're expecting very soon a national management plan for PFAS. We don't know what it's going to include. There's been some concern that they won't set a drinking water limit, and Minority Leader Schumer has actually threatened to hold up Andrew Wheeler's nomination at EPA, so we'll see what happens.
All right, affecting dozens of states. Thank you so much for that reporting and shining the spotlight where we haven't taken a look. Great to have you, Stephanie. Great to have you with us here in the briefing room today on this Monday. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Join us tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time, and again tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern for the President and Beto O'Rourke's rally in El Paso, Texas. We'll see you then.